have started discussing the case studies, that means I am assuming that all the initial frameworks which I had in mind, it had to be elaborated in the introduction part, I hope it will be done. I hope we have also dealt in detail regarding the problems that we have to think while deploying a solution in a ocean liner like Queen Mary 2, thereby stressing on the fact that the role that is to be played by modern day information science engineering is much beyond thinking about the software component or what is the application which is required to be deployed. Continuing in the same line, I think there is one aspect that is left out to be discussed. That is about the evolving role of the department which is traditionally called as Information Systems Department. Because the author does speak about the role. Well, the study of the way in which this department has evolved gives us a view on how our industry has developed over the years. In fact, the authors directly go into the topic and try to define the different roles, but I want to elaborate on that theme. Traditionally, Information Systems Department, or MIS department as it was named in earlier days, was another functional department like marketing or finance or accounts. MIS was also a department in most of the organizations. If you see the structure of governmental organizations even today, all the IT related activities are kept out from every department, and there is a separate department which looks into the IT requirements of all other departments. The understanding both in the governmental agencies and in private bodies are same. That is, there should be a separate department which is tentatively named as Information Systems Department or MIS department, whose whole and sole responsibility is to cater to the IT requirements of that organization. This was the thinking at a point of time. For a considerable point of time in the history, the Information Systems Department was handling one mission, because every company, if it could afford, was having a mainframe, and there were dumb terminals attached to people who required to do some kind of computational work. So it was the job of the IS department to look over that, primarily understand the consequences which made these things possible. Mainframe was one bulky machine which was doing all the computation. Ideally, it was stored in one separate building or in a separate room, which could have been controlled under the control of a department. Then Information System Department had the responsibility to take care of that mainframe, upgrading it, looking after the computational. Early day computer engineers will recall the hectic pace in which those machines were put to work. They had to stand in queue to do their work, write their programs on punch card, punch into the machine, get their work done. So there was centralized facility. Please understand the politics behind this. Centralized facility in any organization is preferable because you can control it. If any system is centralized, you can always control it. So, somewhere computation also developed with the same mentality. But what happened after some time, in the late 70s, early 80s, mini computers and then personal computers became more popular. What happened with that? The importance of this department came down. Mainly because earlier they were the custodians of mainframe. Now please understand, mainframes were replaced by small tiny machines in every employee's desktop, which he could control. So, the centralized controlled approach using a mainframe gave way to decentralized user-powered micro and personal computers. I am not ready to accept that client-server computing emerged suddenly like that. No technology emerges out of vacuum. There will be a need for every technology to evolve. So the necessity for client-server computing was to get back the central control system. If you have a client-server kind of environment in your organization, still you have something called a server, which can be controlled at a central place. What you are giving to your employees is just dumb terminals. There is a certain political thought behind computational developments also. We can't see both of them separately. But ultimately what has happened with the explosion of personal computing market, more than the server area and in other area, the computational powers of personal computers, there was a great leap in their powers, and therefore what we have today is a very peculiar scenario. In most of the large organizations, IS department or MIS department has become simply redundant. If you see most of the modern organizations, there is no place for MIS department. There is no department called as Information Systems Department. There was a time when all the software which was required by a company was developed in-house. The reason given was, see, software does nothing more than automate an established process. There should be a process. Software automates that process. The argument was, since the working of every organization is unique, every organization should have its own software. Who should develop it? The in-house IS department will develop it. After a period of time again, there emerged the concept of mass marketed software. This concept is very new, not more than 25 years old. Where one company specializes in making a generic software and every organization uses it. Please understand the implication of this. If you use a particular kind of software inside your organization, the way you do the work should be according to the requirements of that software. In a sense, more utilization of mass marketed software standardize the working of every organization. All these things should be remembered when we speak about our field today. Since the working of every organization is today somewhat similar, today there is a situation where you can start a software company and make more generic products. If all these things didn't happen, there wouldn't be software companies. So all these things are related to each other. What is the current situation now? The current scenario is this. Majority of the global organizations have a dysfunctional IS department. Dysfunctional because they no more create software or any other things. Their only job is to find a suitable development company who can develop software for them. And then ask them to develop it. Then give it back to them. This situation emerged in the late 80s and the early 90s. This coincided with the fact that India was opening up its economy in 1991. Thereby you should understand the whole scenario. So on the one hand, you had major global corporations wanting to give away their work to some competent people. On the other hand, here in India we had entrepreneurs who are ready to take up such challenge. In the meantime, understand what was happening in the other front, in the network front. After the decommissioning of the internet and making the internet public in 1995, it was possible for computers to communicate with each other and for people to communicate with each other using computers. These two possibilities, combined with the necessity of the large organizations and the wanting of Indian entrepreneurs, came together to form what we call an IT revolution today. So it is not a very simple story. For example, people sometimes give a very simplistic explanation. Why has Bangalore emerged as IT capital? They say it's so good weather. Cosmetic explanation given to a very complex phenomenon which took around 10-15 years of, the story has a meaning of 10-15 years. Right? So now the situation looks something like this. What is the role of information systems department in any traditional organization? One, they have to first understand what is the requirement, IT requirements of that organization. See, one more development is that there are no specific hardware products also. There was a time when computers were known by their names. Altair, Lisa. Hardware differentiation was there. You could identify a computer. This computer and that computer. Today there is no such differentiation. Today a computer also become generic. Hardware is generic. Software is generic. Generic software is a fertile ground for emerging standards. It's a very complex issue. Anyway, we will not deal with that. So what modern IS organizations will do is, it will find out what is the hardware requirement. Take the tender from competitive vendors, get the hardware. They will not do anything. They'll take tender, get the hardware. Give the tender for software development, get the software. Give the tender for integration to some other company, get the solution. So, the role of information systems department in a modern organization is just that of a middleman between the needs of the organization and the people who can supply it. This applies to every business organization, including banks. There was a time when all nationalized banks had a separate IT department. Today also they have, but they don't do much of the development. Take the classic example of Indian Railways. In one of my favorite case studies, which I used to take up earlier in my classes, the IT implementation in Indian Railways is a classic example of how local solutions can be applied to a complex problem. We don't use, in the earlier version, Indian Railways did not use optical fiber cable or satellite communication for networking. Simple copper wire. Very minimal computers without AC support. The entire 10 lakh odd source code were written by in-house engineers in Indian Railways, a government organization whom we always accuse of being incompetent. And the system was working so fine for a long time. Even today, with all its different versions coming into the play, it is still maintained and managed by in-house personnel. So it is not that we can't. People always question. Give one example of Indian solution which has made a mark, software solution. There is that software, this software, this software. Nobody thinks much about Indian Railways and their success story with developing software solution. They didn't only develop, they deployed it in remotest parts of this country with all kinds of problems and still made it work. One more of my favorite example is automation of our stock market. One of the classic case study on how India could deploy it. So what I was trying to say is, even in banks, nationalized bank today, the IT department is not that strong. You don't see engineers getting recruited into IT department of a nationalized bank. That is because there are no more opportunities there. They don't create software for their banks. They get a core banking solution from some established vendor. Right? So there is a change. What I am trying to say is, the authors have given a list of roles that a IS functional can play. It's good to read, but at the same time you have to remember that it's a past story. The present IS departments are not that strong. In any organization, it's not that strong. Outsourcing is the word. Outsourcing is the word. But understand, is outsourcing a business necessity? Is a classic question. From a business perspective, I am asking. Consider a normal activity of a business organization, marketing, sales. You have to do your marketing. The execution of it may take place by someone else. For example, making of an ad. You do the conceptualization. You give the execution part. That is right. But can you give the core part of your business to someone? How can you give the core part of your business to some external player and still retain the competitive edge? The question is often not asked actually. Modern Indian IT companies solve this problem in a unique way. For example, a big company like, I don't want to name, but a big software company say in India, naturally what they do is if they have a very big employer, a big client from US, a multinational bank, or somebody who is involved in a large manufacturing of a product, say, they reserve, internally in their company, they reserve, say 1,500 employees will always be ready to work on any project of this company. And they won't be transferred to the competitor. If they are also clients of this software company, they won't be transferred to them until a period of time. Such kind of regulations have emerged in the absence of any clear rules to govern this kind of situations. So the bottom line I want to say is this: modern information systems department, by and large, have been dethroned from their glorious status they once enjoyed. The modern version of an information system department are independent software developers sitting in a software company. They develop generic products. The work of IS department is to pick the competent product, take it, and maybe tailor it to the needs of that particular organization. Right? We'll keep it there and stop this discussion here. So this completes majority of whatever I wanted to say in this particular topic. Probably what we can do is we can take cases from case number 1.2, 1.3 and the chapter and case.
Okay, what is 1.3? I'll go through 1.3.